All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping right onto a freezing, fog-drenched battlefield that honestly forever changed history. We're diving into the accounts from the Forge of Scottish Freedom and the Iron Echo of Freedom. So forget the modern world for a second. Picture this: two massive armies just standing on the absolute brink of total destruction. You know, this isn't just about dates or names recorded in some dusty old ledger. It's about the raw, visceral human experience of fighting for the right to just exist. We're going to break down this monumental clash step by step, unpack the psychology of warfare, leadership, and really look at the extraordinary lengths people will go to when they are pushed to the absolute limit.
Okay, so we are instantly dropped into the sensory reality of this moment. Just imagine a biting cold wind howling across the mud. There's this thick, suffocating fog blanketing the ground, completely limiting visibility and kind of just isolating every single man in his own terrifying thoughts. And hanging in the air, it's that distinct, metallic scent of steel mixed with pure human dread. You know, this wasn't some clean, sanitized, strategic game. The men on that field were freezing. They were exhausted before the fight even started, and they knew exactly what the weapons they were smelling were about to do to them. This vivid atmosphere really drives home the massive psychological toll an army has to endure before a single sword is even swung.
So, we've got the morning standoff. It starts at dawn with the cold wind howling, then sunrise, where the sun is literally struggling through the dark sky. By mid-morning, the armies are locked in perfect formation. And finally, those agonizing moments right before, with just absolute silence. As that morning drags on, the wait sets in. By sunrise, nature itself almost seems to be dreading the inevitable slaughter, right? By mid-morning, you have the warriors of Scotland with their blue flags waving proudly against that bitter wind, standing directly across from the English army, which is just this armored, unstoppable wall locked in intimidating formation. And then, absolute silence takes over. It's that heavy quiet that rings in your ears, just pregnant with impending violence. Honestly, the psychological weight of that silence is probably harder to survive than the actual battle.
So what actually breaks that suffocating tension? Well, one man rides forward, William Wallace. Think about the immense, almost irrational courage that takes. You've got thousands of men frozen in anticipation, tightly packed together for safety, and this one single figure deliberately separates himself from the ranks. Looking at the mechanics of leadership, this is an absolute game changer. His very presence, just riding out alone into the space where all the killing is about to happen, it acts as a psychological anchor for every single soldier behind him. He steps totally out of the role of a traditional commander and transforms, right before their eyes, into the physical embodiment of their collective resolve.
Raising his sword high into the cold air, he completely shatters that silence with a thunderous voice, shouting, "Today we do not fight for land. Today we fight for freedom." Consider the monumental impact of that pivot. I mean, in medieval warfare, conflicts were almost exclusively about territorial expansion, borders, or, some royal ego. But with just one phrase, Wallace completely flips the paradigm of the war. They aren't fighting over a piece of dirt or a nobleman's grievance anymore. They're fighting for an idea. By elevating the stakes to the very concept of liberty, he taps into an absolutely untouchable reserve of human motivation.
Now, the English retaliation, brutally efficient. We're looking at the English volley. The commander raises his hand, hundreds of arrows are released, the clouds turn dark, and shields are lifted. This is the sheer cold mechanics of empire mobilizing against a rebellion. The English commander literally just raises his hand, no grand speeches, no emotional appeals, just a quiet, calculated gesture. And within seconds, hundreds of arrows are released into the sky. The volume of this volley is so massive that the clouds actually turn dark as death rains down. Desperately, the Scottish soldiers lift their wooden shields to weather the storm. It's a terrifyingly precise counterattack, right? It's designed not just to kill, but to completely demoralize the enemy before the infantry even gets a chance to engage.
Under that deadly rain, the harsh reality really set in. It was a fight for survival, for identity, and for freedom. Soldiers fell as the arrows found their marks, for sure. But a remarkable number stood their ground. Why? Well, because when the stakes shift from territory to existential survival, human endurance changes completely. When you're backed into a corner and forced to fight for the right to simply exist as who you are, the human spirit can withstand an unimaginable barrage. The Scottish shields held together not because they had superior military training, but because the guys underneath them knew that failure meant the total erasure of their people.
And then comes the spark that lights the powder keg. A single word from Wallace, roaring over the terrifying din of falling arrows.
Forward. It's a command that leaves absolutely zero room for hesitation. After hours of waiting, freezing, taking brutal punishment from the sky, this word is the ultimate release valve. It channels all that pent-up tension, all that visceral fear, and that fiery resolve straight into kinetic, unstoppable forward motion.
In that exact instant, the Scottish army charged. The ground literally trembled beneath their feet as these two massive bodies of humanity finally collided. Swords clashing, shields shattering, raw cries of war totally filling the air. There's this deeply poignant detail from the accounts about a young soldier, trembling with absolute terror, facing the enemy line for the very first time. Yet, armed with this sudden, desperate courage, he strikes with everything he has. And it's so crucial to remember that macro-level history is built on these micro-level moments. This grand epic clash was ultimately decided by thousands of terrified individuals choosing, in real time, not to run away.
Here we see a fundamental, timeless contrast. On one side you have the English army. Discipline, precision, calculated steps, controlled strikes. They are a well-oiled military machine built entirely on order and routine. But on the other side, the Scottish army, passion, rage in every swing, hope in every step. They bring this asymmetric advantage that just disrupts machinery, raw, unyielding human emotion. Every single swing carries a desperate rage, and every step carries hope for a future. It's the classic collision of systemic perfection against chaotic human willpower. And let me tell you, in the brutally close quarters of medieval combat, that kind of passionate rage is a profoundly terrifying force to face.
When these forces fully interlock, we hit the heart of chaos. Fire and steel everywhere, blood on the ground, cries of war filling the air, and Wallace just fighting like a storm. The battlefield turns into pure, unrelenting chaos. The air is completely consumed by the noise, and right in the middle of that frenzy is Wallace. His sword is moving like lightning, breaking the English lines. This is another really vital component of his leadership. He didn't just point the way, he carved it out himself. His personal bravery acts as literal fuel for his men, actively pushing the entire army way beyond their normal physical and psychological limits. It proves that momentum in battle is highly contagious. Amidst all that deafening noise, the clashing metal, the screaming, the sheer sensory overload of combat, something cuts through. A sudden, powerful cry rises from the battlefield. It starts with just one voice, then a dozen, then hundreds. It starts unifying all that chaotic, desperate energy of the Scottish forces into one singular, intensely focused point of power.
Scotland! It wasn't some complex military maneuver. It wasn't a convoluted, multi-stage tactical order from a general sitting safely on a hill. No, it was just the name of their home, screamed with absolutely everything they had left in their burning lungs. With one final unified push, driven entirely by that massive roar of collective identity, the Scottish army surged forward as a single, unstoppable entity.
And here is the monumental turning point of the conflict. Because of that incredible, emotionally charged surge, the English lines began to break. Just let the gravity of that sink in for a second. This unstoppable, heavily armored wall of imperial precision stepped back. This wasn't merely a tactical retreat, it was a profound psychological crack in their armor. The moment had finally arrived where the raw, chaotic power of passion and hope actually managed to physically dismantle the rigid structures of discipline and machinery. The illusion of invincibility was totally shattered. But as we all know, extreme violence inevitably subsides, leaving a really heavy toll in its wake. As the deafening sounds of battle slowly fade, the fog slowly returns. Surviving soldiers stand there exhausted, wounded, but deeply proud. The immediate clash of steel is over, but as they catch their breath in that quiet mist, completely surrounded by the cost of their victory, they fully understand the harsh reality of their situation. The struggle for true independence, it had literally only just started.
Looking out across the quiet, devastated battlefield, Wallace realized the enduring, undeniable lesson of the day. Covered in the aftermath of survival, a faint smile actually appeared on his exhausted face. He understood exactly what they had accomplished against impossible odds. Freedom is never given, it is fought for. It's a really sobering, heavy realization, but honestly an incredibly empowering one. It perfectly captures the essence of why ordinary people chose to stand in that freezing fog, facing certain death in the very first place.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider this. The battle ended, but the true fight just began.
When you look at the raw determination it took for those heavily outmatched individuals to stand their ground against an unstoppable empire, it kind of forces a bit of self-reflection, doesn't it? I mean, we might not be standing on a freezing Scottish battlefield with broadswords today, but the core psychological principle remains exactly the same. What is your inner Scotland? What values, goals, or fundamental freedoms in your own life do you hold so incredibly dear that you'd refuse to step back when the arrows inevitably start flying? Think about that. What are you truly willing to fight for? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we dive into another fascinating topic.